Science is about discovering and organizing knowledge about our natural world. Natural in contrast to the supernatural or mythical world that we would find in a movie or book. We discover this knowledge by observing and recording natural phenomena, and taking notes of any patterns or regularities. Based on the patterns and regularities that we observe, we will develop a hypothesis that tries to explain our phenomena. To then test our hypothesis, we will design an experiment that will help us gather data that we can use to evaluate the hypothesis. Once we have collected enough data, we can analyze this data to determine whether the hypothesis is supported or refuted by our evidence. And so then we might want to revise our hypothesis or develop a new one based on our findings, or we update our experiment and then test and analyze again, until we then in the end have a satisfying explanation of the phenomenon that we observed. And this piece of knowledge then that we discovered, we organized together with the other knowledge about our natural world that we or maybe someone else has discovered, and so as time goes on, we're building a more complete understanding of our world. And of course, this knowledge base is not a static thing, but different discoveries might interact with each other, so they might get updated based on a newer piece of evidence, or we might base our discovery on the research conducted by previous scientists. And now to make this process of discovering and organizing knowledge through experimentation as smooth as possible, there are a few things we should look out for. First of all, the way we conduct our research and how we make our discoveries should be systematic and objective. So this can mean after we collected some data and we analyze this data, we're doing this exhaustively. So we're considering every single data point and not just the first half, for example. And then objectively means that we would want the things that we discover to be true in general and not just for us. A very important aspect of the process of science is that we communicate our methods and results with others. Because if we communicate properly and transparently, then other scientists have the opportunity to reproduce our studies, which is a way of checking and verifying that we didn't make any mistakes. And then also scientists can build upon our findings. And to now better satisfy all these criteria that improve the process of science, and also in order to speed up and improve the process itself, we can make use of programming. Starting with the design of experiments, here we can use programming to automate parts that we would otherwise have to repeat multiple times. This could be, for example, a reaction time experiment that we want to do with, let's say, 100 participants. And if we design that experiment as a program, then we can just pass it on to these 100 participants and also to 100 more if we chose to do so, without much more effort. Coming to the systematic aspect of science, we can imagine that for the experiment, we can run the same experiment with a different set of parameters. And then once we have gathered all our data, it's fairly easy to run an exhaustive analysis with some program. Now for the objective part. Here computers have the obvious advantage of not being subject to human bias. Of course, humans write the computer programs, but there will be still way less bias if a calculation is run by a computer compared to it being run by a human. So much for the experiment and analysis side. Once we have our results, we can use, for example, Jupyter notebooks to communicate our findings and also the methodology behind it. And in these notebooks, we can have our code that is responsible for the analysis, and then we can also nicely visualize the results of this analysis. And because we're showing both our methodology and the results, we're also making our process transparent. And so this all then also helps making our findings reproducible, because we can provide our code, we can provide our data, and everything is set up as a program that optimally is easy to interact with, and so then other scientists can just rerun our code to see if everything adds up. Finally, coming to the organizing part. Once we have our data and our results, and we want to make them transparent and available, we can store them in databases that can be then made easily available for everyone so that they can perform their own research. Or we can imagine, for example, Google Scholar, which is a huge database of scientific research that is organized in such a way that we can easily retrieve the things we're looking for.